It all begins in a world full of monsters that live in dark places known as dungeons. These dark labyrinths unleash fierce and dangerous creatures that threaten everyone. Bringing immeasurable terror to the human world, these beasts attack the cities without mercy. People are terrified as the monsters destroy everything and attack the knights protecting the area. Even with soldiers trying to fight bravely, the creatures seem to be too strong for them. Because of this, everyone hoped for the arrival of a hero who could face this great threat. Our scene then takes us to the outskirts of the Belgrade Empire, where a city has been attacked. There, a monstrous wolf growls, showing its sharp fangs, ready to attack anyone. The creature then corners a mother and her son, who have nowhere to run. At that moment, the beast opens its enormous mouth, preparing to devour them both at once. With nothing she can do, the woman just hugs her son, expecting the worst. But before the attack happens, a shining sword is unsheathed by someone mysterious. Right after, this person takes down the wolf with a single blow, saving the family. Kneeling down, the savior asks if they're okay, and the woman confirms they are. Then his team of knights appears, and he tells the civilians to leave the rest to them. The young man introduces himself as Ash, the captain of the Empire's 13th Knight Unit. Being from the 13th Unit, the protagonist smiles confidently at the battle to come. Ash then orders his team to take down the enemies, and they all advance into the fight together. Shortly after, another creature leaps toward the captain to try a surprise attack. However, the protagonist faces the monster with a serious look, and his eye begins to glow. Ash firmly grips his sword, preparing for the creature's attack. He then charges forward with his shining blade and hits the wolf with a precise strike. But just as the monster falls to the ground, another flying creature appears in the sky. Using the wolf's body for a boost, the protagonist launches himself as the griffin descends to attack. The beast strikes the ground with its claws, and Ash narrowly dodges the blow. With a backward leap, the young man gets away from the danger and looks for an opening to strike back. Just then, he spots a farmer's rake leaning against a nearby wall. The captain grabs the tool and imbues it with his energy, asking what the monster thinks of that. He then throws the rake with all his might toward the flying creature. The attack hits its mark, and the griffin screams in pain as it falls toward the ground. With his hand glowing, Ash prepares to use some kind of special ability next. However, the situation gets complicated as his friends are surrounded by several monsters. His companions complain that the number of enemies seems to be endless. After defeating another wolf, the protagonist asks if Mary and Will are okay. Ash then raises his sword and shouts that they will never lose and will protect the village. Hearing their captain's words, the knight Will smiles, full of determination. His other companion, Mirai, also feels motivated to continue fighting with all her might. With that, the entire 13th unit advances together to face the horde of creatures. The battle continues into the night, and the team finally manages to defeat all the monsters. Tired, Ash wonders if they really managed to finish off all the enemies there. Suddenly, a strange noise comes from a fallen body on the ground, startling everyone. His companions are shocked by what they see emerging from the shadows. Even Ash is surprised and speechless at the sight of the new creature that has appeared. Soon, a giant serpent emerges in front of the team under the light of the full moon. But the captain just smirks and says it looks like one of the big ones has finally arrived. The monster then opens its mouth and shoots a powerful blast of fire at the group. Ash stands in front of the attack to protect his friends from the fiery explosion. The young man then shields himself with his arm while enduring the intense heat of the blow. With a determined look, the protagonist seems to be planning his next move. He then charges through the flames and leaps toward the giant serpent's head. The creature turns quickly and tries to devour the captain with a single bite. Ash gets caught but manages to use his sword to keep the monster's mouth from closing. Seeing her captain in danger, the archer Iruka runs to help, shouting his name. She then readies a special arrow that glows with an intense bluish energy. Iruka fires her powerful attack, which flies swiftly toward the creature's eye. The arrow hits the serpent's weak spot, and it can't react in time. The monster screams in pain and throws its head back, creating an opening for the captain. Ash takes the chance and jumps out, thanking Iruka for saving him. The protagonist readies himself again with a serious look to continue the battle. He then charges with his glowing sword to attack the distracted serpent. With a battle cry, the captain unleashes all his energy in a single final blow. His powerful attack cuts through the air in a trail of golden light, heading for the monster. With that, the giant serpent is finally defeated, falling to the ground in 2 pieces. The villagers who were watching are shocked by what they just witnessed. Then everyone starts to celebrate, shouting that they finally won. The narrator explains that the monster attack on the Empire was contained. And it all happened thanks to the great efforts of the 13th Knight Unit. This was mainly because of Captain Ash, who had a prodigious performance in the battle. Defeating more than 200 monsters by himself, he was essential to the group's victory. After the fight, his companions celebrate the feat and jump on the protagonist. Because of his overwhelming strength, the young man received the nickname Ash the Vanquisher. Our scene then shifts to a large castle on a sunny and peaceful day. Inside, the king recognizes Ash's services in subjugating the monsters. As a reward, the emperor grants him the rank of a Quasi, noble of the kingdom. The protagonist then accepts the honor with a bow and a grateful look. In a ballroom, Ash is greeted with applause by all the nobles present. His friends comment that this is a huge and unusual promotion for a knight. They also joke that the young captain is now part of high society. With an awkward smile, the protagonist reveals that he is also getting engaged. This news takes everyone by surprise, and his companions are petrified with shock. Yuruka despairs and yells for Ash to reject the engagement, but he says he can't ask for the impossible. The other party in the arrangement is Miss Laffy, the second daughter of the prestigious noble House Lagan. The protagonist explains that as a newly appointed noble, there's no way he can refuse this arrangement. Even though he's confused by so many things happening at once, he tries to stay calm. Ash then looks at his medal and thinks that, in the end, all of this is good for him. Everything seemed to be going well, and he thought he would finally have a quiet and happy life. With a toast among friends, the young captain really thought things would be this way. But then 3 years pass, and Ash is shocked by what he has just heard from his fiancée. The girl says she will repeat what she said one more time, so he understands the situation clearly. Laffy then stands up and points at the young man, saying that their engagement is off. Not understanding at all, the protagonist is completely stunned by her sudden declaration. To make matters worse, Ash is summoned before a man who appears to be an important superior. This man then points at the captain with a malicious smile and banishes him from the knights. Returning to the previous scene, the young man asks Laffy what he did to make her dislike him. He says that all his clothes and preferences were adjusted to please the noblewoman. The protagonist even stopped drinking and smoking just to satisfy her wishes. On top of all that, he also made an effort to give her many expensive and beautiful gifts. But Laffy replies that she was tired of dealing with a barbaric commoner like him. She reveals that she became close to a gentleman from an earl's family who gives her presents. Shocked by her shallowness, Ash wonders if that is the only reason for the breakup. The protagonist says he can't accept this and that he truly loves her, but she scoffs at him. Ash denies the accusation and says that it was actually her father who asked him to marry her. Laffy becomes furious at the comment and accuses the young man of insulting her father as well. She then closes her fan and says she no longer wishes to speak with a commoner like him. The noblewoman points at the former captain and orders her guards to remove him from the premises. Grabbing Ash by the arms, the guards begin to drag him out by force. He shouts for them to let him go and asks Laffy to listen to him, but the girl simply ignores him. Before leaving, the young woman says she never wants to see his face again. The scene then changes to the city streets on a clear and seemingly peaceful day. Walking alone, the protagonist thinks that this whole situation is very strange. For the Lagan family to publicly break an engagement like this makes no sense. Suddenly, someone calls his name, and the young man turns around, surprised to see who it is. It's 2 knights who order him to go to the barracks on their superior's orders. There, his officer Mike Librob says that Ash is expelled from the Order of Knights. The protagonist is completely shocked and speechless at the unexpected news. He asks why, and Mike replies that the young man is a hindrance to him. The officer says that Ash gets in the way of his promotion and also his love life with Laffy. With that, the former captain finally understands that Mike is his ex-fiancée's new partner. This man is Mike Librob, the protagonist's superior officer and an imperial knight, a privileged brat who only got his position through his family's prestige. The young man then realizes that Mike is jealous of his promotion because he would outrank him. With a smirk, the officer asks what's wrong with the look in the protagonist's eyes. Mike then touches Ash's medal and says he never liked the idea of commoners becoming nobles. He continues his taunt, saying that the subjugation of monsters was nothing special. At this, Ash remembers all the difficult moments he went through with his team. Tired of the taunts, the former captain grabs Mike's collar in a fit of rage. He glares at him furiously and yells at the officer for his despicable attitude. But Mike threatens him, asking if it's a good idea to challenge someone from an earl's family. He continues, saying that if the young man doesn't cooperate, his friends will also be kicked out of the unit. With nothing he can do, the protagonist lets go of the officer, feeling powerless in the situation. Mike then boasts, asking if Ash finally understands the difference in status between them. The officer takes the young man's medal and says he'll teach him what's important for a knight. He throws the decoration on the ground and crushes it with his foot in front of the former captain. With a malicious look, he says that what's important is grace, something a commoner will never have. Mike then orders the young man to pack his things and be gone by the end of the day. Carrying his belongings through the corridors, the other knights comment on his appearance. The protagonist continues on his way, head down, wondering what just happened. Arriving at his destination, a hand knocks on the wooden door before entering the room. The young man then enters and introduces himself, saying he brought the equipment to return to the order. A man with a strange mustache greets him, saying that the disgraced knight from the rumors has arrived. The protagonist asks what he's talking about, and the man says that everyone already knows. He says the rumor is that Ash was dismissed for forcing his fiancée to do strange things. The man continues, saying that the young man forced Laffy to play baby, and she asked Mike for help. At that, the noble officer got angry and fired Ash, which leaves the protagonist stunned. Outside the building, the young man shouts not to joke about something like that. Furious, he punches a brick wall and screams his former officer's name. The former captain is outraged that Mike would spread such a baseless rumor about him. He looks at the building and laments having worked so hard for that for so long. In just an instant, the protagonist ended up losing everything he had achieved. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls him senior, and the young man turns around in surprise. It was Yuruka, who runs to him and asks if it's true that he's leaving the Knights. This is Ulrika Erdevane, the only noble-blooded member of the 13th unit. The young man corrects her, saying he was actually fired, which leaves his friend shocked. She then asks why and says she still wanted to be guided by her captain. With a gentle smile on his face, the protagonist just looks at her and says her name. The narrator explains that she cried a lot when she first joined, but now she's much stronger. But then the girl calls to him again with a somewhat strange look on her face. She gets closer and says that if he wanted to play baby, he should have just asked her. The young man yells that the rumor is false, and Ruka says then he doesn't have to leave. With a sad look, she asks what will happen to the Janus unit if he leaves. The protagonist is silent for a moment, thinking about what his friend said. The story then goes back 3 years to that same village they saved. There, Murray complains that even though they fought desperately, only the captain was decorated for it. Wool explains that the Empire doesn't see the danger of dungeons, and thinks it's just about subjugating monsters. Even so, the protagonist gives a slight smile, thinking of something important for his team. He says that the fact they protected the village and received the gratitude of its residents is the truth. The young man continues, saying they can be proud of that, even if the nobles don't understand. He then suggests giving the unit a unique name, and Haruka thinks it's a great idea. The captain asks if Wool has any good suggestions, and he thinks for a moment. Wool suggests Janus, the name of an ancient god with one face in the front and another in the back. Everyone agrees it's perfect since they fight against both humans and monsters, and the name is decided. With a confident smile, Ash declares that from that day on, they are the Janus unit. Back in the present, the protagonist says that even if he leaves, he'll always be part of the Janus unit. The former captain emphasizes that no matter where he is, his heart will always be with the team. Yuruka then looks at him with a worried expression and asks what he will do now. Ash says he's tired of the imperial nobles and will probably go to a foreign country. His friend then grabs him and yells that she's going with him, but he says she can't do that. The young man pats her on the head and asks her to stay and protect the unit. The girl blushes a little at the gesture, but understands the responsibility he has given her. She then asks him to write a letter when he gets settled, and he nods in agreement. He says goodbye to her with a wave as his friend stares at him, demanding a promise. Yuruka then stays behind, watching her former captain leave with a serious look. But suddenly, a mischievous smile appears on her face, and her eyes gleam in a strange way. Ash then officially returns his quasi-noble title and gives up his family name. With that, he thinks that from this moment on, he will go back to being just Ash, like he was before. At the train station, the young man stretches, feeling like a great weight has been lifted from his shoulders. He then picks up a pamphlet about his new destination to look over the information. With a smile and his luggage in hand, the former knight prepares for his new journey. The train then begins to move, and the scene shows us a beautiful landscape of the kingdom. The steam locomotive continues on its way along the tracks, taking Ash to a new life. Inside a luxurious car, the young man sits comfortably to enjoy the trip. But suddenly, an older man wearing a top hat appears at the door of his cabin. The stranger then walks slowly toward the protagonist with very firm steps. He approaches and asks if he can have a moment of the young man's attention, who looks at him. Not recognizing him, the former knight asks who this mysterious man in front of him is. The gentleman shows the pamphlet Ash was looking at, asks if he happened to have dropped it. The protagonist thanks him, and the man asks if this is his first time visiting the kingdom. Ash asks how he knew, and the old man explains that he was looking at the landscape in a curious way. The former captain then says that in his empire, only the wealthiest ride on trains like this one. The man laughs and says that in the Rosebell Kingdom, this is common transportation, which surprises Ash. The gentleman then explains that the kingdom is a pioneer in the development of magical tools. This happened because the Rosebell Kingdom was constantly exposed to the threat of dungeons. Because of this, the only thing that could combat these creatures was the magic of sorcerers. They used their powers to create fire and water and fight against the fierce monsters. In addition, magic was also used to miraculously heal injured bodies. As a byproduct of this magical research, tools were created with materials from monsters. Thanks to these inventions, people's lives changed drastically, and the kingdom prospered. That is why the Rosebell Kingdom is now known worldwide as a magical superpower. Ash then understands that the Empire is behind in this because it dismisses the danger of dungeons. Suddenly, a voice announces their arrival in the city, and the old man seems excited by the news. The train finally stops at the station, and the announcement asks passengers not to forget anything. The protagonist and his new friend then get off together, carrying their respective luggage. Outside, the young man calls out to the gentleman to say goodbye and thank him for the company. An elegant carriage with a well-dressed coachman was already waiting for them at the exit. The former knight shakes the old man's hand and thanks him for everything he taught him on the trip. The man then welcomes him to the kingdom and wishes him an enjoyable stay. With an excited smile on his face, the young man replies that he will, with great enthusiasm. Walking through the streets, he finally sees the famous second dungeon city of Rosebell. Ash is amazed to see the armor and magical items displayed in the shop windows. The city streets are full of life with a bustling market and many people. Ash continues his walk through the local market, observing all the activity. But suddenly, a woman runs past him with a panicked expression on her face. The young man then turns a little surprised to understand what is happening. She ends up bumping into the former knight as she continues her desperate escape down the street. Shortly after, a group of suspicious men appears, chasing the girl and telling her to stop. With nowhere to go, the woman ends up cornered in a dead-end alley by the bullies. They approach with malicious smiles and say that now she has no way to escape. Terrified, the young woman backs away and shakes her head, not knowing what to do in that situation. But when one of them tries to grab her, a mysterious hand grabs his shoulder from behind. It was Ash who looks at him with a serious expression and says he's had enough to drink for today. The bully asks who he is, and the protagonist says the girl is distressed by his persistence. Annoyed, the man yells at him to shut up and tries to punch the young man in the face. But the former knight easily dodges the blow and a bluish aura appears around him. He then retaliates with a powerful punch right in the aggressor's stomach, who doesn't react. The man spits and screams in pain from the impact of the blow, which sends him flying back. With that, the bully falls to the ground defeated, and his friends are surprised by the scene. Furious, the other two curse at him and charge together to try and attack the protagonist. Ash then faces both of them at the same time, defeating them with quick and precise strikes. The young man notices they move as if they're used to fighting, which is to be expected. To finish it, the former captain lands a powerful kick on the last bully, and his eyes glow. The bully screams in pain as he is thrown far by the protagonist's blow. Seeing this, the last man remaining is completely terrified by the young man's strength. But Ash gives him no time to react and hits him with a precise punch to the face. With that, all the aggressors end up on the ground, completely defeated by the former knight. After the fight, the protagonist adjusts his clothes and seems quite calm about the situation. However, the first man he fought gets up, his eyes glowing with rage. The bully then draws his sword and says he won't forgive what the young man just did. Ash is a little surprised by this and wonders about him drawing a weapon in the city. The man then charges, shouting that he's going to take him down, and strikes with all his might. But before the attack hits him, a mysterious voice shouts that that's enough. An armored knight appears in the alley and says he can no longer ignore the commotion. The newcomer continues, saying that an amateur couldn't defeat a real knight. To everyone's surprise, he reveals that he knows the young man and calls him Ash, one of the Empire's best. The protagonist smiles upon recognizing his old friend and calls him by his name, Bale. The knight introduces himself as Bale Barone and arrests the bullies for causing trouble. A memory then shows the two of them fighting an exchange match in the past. They face each other in an intense duel, their swords clashing with great force. The win-loss record between them was exactly 50% for each side. Back in the present, the two shake hands, and the narrator says he is a good rival. To celebrate their reunion, the two friends toast with mugs of beer in a tavern. Bale says he rushed over because of a disturbance but didn't expect to find a friend. While drinking, he asks what Ash is doing in the kingdom, and the young man looks a bit embarrassed. The former knight then begins to tell him everything that happened to him in the Empire. After explaining the situation, the protagonist says that's why he left the knights and came here. The young man says just thinking about it all makes him very angry and frustrated. With a snap of his fingers, Bale suggests that Ash start a new life there in the Rosebell Kingdom. The protagonist is confused by the proposal and doesn't understand what his friend means. The knight then points at him and invites him to become a dungeon hunter. Ash is even more confused and repeats his friend's words, not understanding the concept. Bale explains that it's a job where you hunt monsters inside the dangerous dungeons. After that, they collect the magic stones from the creatures' bodies to sell at the association. The knight says he would be happy if a capable former knight like him became a hunter. But suddenly, a soldier runs into the tavern and shouts that there's an emergency. The man reports that a monster outbreak has occurred in the dungeon, and everyone is shocked. The soldier continues, saying it's a creature stampede and the situation is very serious. He explains that they've already sent a request for help, but don't know how many they can gather in time. Bale then turns to his friend and calls his name with a serious look on his face. He extends his hand and asks if the young man will fight alongside them to protect the city. A stampede is a phenomenon where monsters become fierce and invade cities. Creatures that come out of the dungeon destroy everything in their path and threaten everyone. The monsters relentlessly attack everything they see, and the people are in constant danger. Ash then understands that they need to eliminate the creatures before there are any casualties. Without hesitation, the former knight agrees to help and says he will fight with his friend. He shakes Bale's hand and says he'll do his best not to get in his way during the battle. The two then head to the Hunters Association to join the others. The place is in chaos, with several hunters arguing and preparing for the fight. The soldier who called them announces Bale's arrival, but the others complain about the delay. A hunter argues with a girl, asking if there's been any contact with the Night Order. Ash comments on the confusion, and his friend says it shows the gravity of the situation. Bale then approaches the receptionist and asks her to explain the mission details. The girl reports an abnormal outbreak of 300 blue monkeys on the 10th underground floor. With a worried look, the knight concludes that a stampede is definitely going to happen. The receptionist asks who the young man next to him is, and Bale introduces him as his friend. She's a bit suspicious, as the young man doesn't seem to be a knight or a hunter. Two other hunters approach and ask if the newcomer has any battle experience. Bale assures them that his friend's skills are excellent and they don't need to worry. After clarifying everything, the knight tells them to hurry up and go to the dungeon. The group then arrives at the entrance of the city's second dungeon, a dark and dangerous place. Bale offers to lend his friend a weapon and armor, and he accepts the help. Ash chooses a light breastplate and says he prefers a longsword, but Bale suggests something else. Bale then reveals that the weapon is a magic sword, an item Ash has never heard of. The knight explains that it's a technology exclusive to the kingdom that combines magic and weapons. To activate it, he hands his friend a magic stone to place in the hole on the guard. The young man then takes the stone and inserts it into the sword, a bit curious about the result. The stone fits perfectly, and a bluish light begins to emanate from the weapon's blade. A shining aura envelops the sword, and the former knight is surprised by what he sees. Bale says the weapon's power greatly increases its cutting edge, making it stronger. Ash is amazed and says a weapon like this will completely change the way of fighting. With preparations complete, the group gathers to enter the dungeon and face the monsters. The narrator explains that the dungeon has several floors, and the monsters change on each one. The deeper they go, the fiercer and more dangerous the creatures become. Bale says they've set up a barricade on the stairs to the 3rd floor to intercept them. Arriving there, the protagonist is surprised to see the place looks like an artificial building. The knight says dungeons are full of mysteries, and they should focus on the mission. He points to a barricade on the stairs to the 4th floor, where they will form a unit. But suddenly, the barricade starts being attacked by something with tremendous force. Bale shouts that the monsters have already arrived, and a hunter despairs at the situation. The knight then calls his friend to the fight, and the two advance into battle together. In an instant, the barricade is completely destroyed by an energy blast. Shortly after, a pack of giant blue monkeys emerges from the hole ready to attack. Bale warns that the monkey's weak spot is their head, and Ash confirms, ready for the fight. Right after, one of the creatures charges with a fierce roar toward the protagonist. But the former knight gives a slight smile and notices they aren't that fast. With a quick and precise strike, he uses his magic sword to cut the monster in half. The other hunters are shocked to see the young man defeated the creature in a single blow. He then wonders what this sword is, as it seems to cut like a knife through butter. While fighting, Bale laughs and asks his friend if he liked the powerful magic sword. Ash then realizes that with this weapon, he might not even need to aim for the weak spot on the head. To test his theory, he attacks another monkey with a horizontal slash across its body. The blow works perfectly, and the creature is defeated, being thrown against the wall. Even on the ground, the monster still twitches a bit before it stops moving. But suddenly, another creature attacks him by surprise, trying to grab him from the ground. The former knight reacts in time and manages to cut the monster with his shining sword. Bale then warns that these creatures are special and very resilient, which annoys Ash. The protagonist understands that this is a hunter's job and kicks one of the monsters. But the horde of creatures seems endless, and another one charges toward him. He then complains that the situation is tough as he cuts down another enemy with his sword. Meanwhile, Bale faces a monkey that is gathering energy and says their fur is worth a lot. The knight prepares his attack and says the fur is popular for nobles' winter clothes. The other hunters are impressed, as the blue monkeys are not weak monsters. The hunters are impressed and wonder who Captain Bale's helper is. The knight then reveals that he is Ash the Vanquisher, a name that surprises everyone. He continues, explaining that the young man once stopped a monster stampede in the Empire. The soldier says that on that occasion, the former knight defeated 200 monsters by himself. The others are shocked by the number and say he's an elite, like a hero. The knight concludes that if he's on the same level as Bale, then he has the skill of the 10 swords. Ash is a bit confused and asks what this title of the kingdom's 10 swords is. A red energy then appears around his eye as he continues to fight. The knight takes off his helmet to answer the question and says yes with a serious look. With a slightly sinister smile, he explains that it is the greatest desire of all knights. The protagonist then shouts if his friend hasn't gotten stronger and praises him during the battle. Bale replies that the former knight has also gotten stronger than he was a year ago. The two then fight side by side, their swords glowing in a flurry against the monsters. The young man asks if the knight really thinks so and seems happy with the compliment. Bale says this just makes him want his friend to become a hunter like him even more. After a while, the fight finally ends, and the two are surrounded by monster bodies. The other hunters watch in shock, realizing they defeated 300 monkeys by themselves. They then realize they did nothing, and Ash and Bale celebrate their victory together. Back at the association, the receptionist counts the total value of the collected magic stones. The girl announces that the total is 600,000 rows, and everyone is surprised by the amount. Bale asks if elite hunters don't always earn that amount, and the girl confirms it. With a smile and a wink, the knight then recruits his friend again for the cause. He asks if Ash doesn't want to become a dungeon hunter, and the young man looks thoughtful. The receptionist gets excited and asks him to accept the proposal with her hands clasped together. The former knight gives an awkward smile and says he supposes so, accepting the offer. With a handshake, he confirms he will become a hunter, and everyone celebrates. The association staff applauds the decision of the new team member enthusiastically. To celebrate, Bale suggests a welcome party, and everyone agrees with the idea. The scene then shows the city's clock tower at night, with the full moon in the sky. Several days later, at the Imperial Knights Barracks, a letter arrives for someone. A female soldier calls for Ruka and says a postcard has arrived for her in her name. The knight thanks her and takes the letter with a slightly curious look about the sender. She wonders who it could be and is a bit confused looking at the card in her hands. Suddenly, a somewhat sinister laugh is heard, and the girl stands with her back to the room. With a frightening look and a malicious smile, she says she will go see him right now. The scene then returns to the Imperial Knights headquarters on a sunny day. Yuruka reads the card with a relieved smile and says he seems to be full of energy. But then her face changes, and she reads the sender's address with a strange look. Her former teammates greet her, but she seems a bit startled. Mari and Will enter the room, and Yuruka is surprised to see them there after so long. Yuruka then asks if their training is over, and Mirai confirms it is, without much enthusiasm. The red-haired girl throws herself on the sofa and says it's not the same without Ash around. At this, the blonde reveals that she heard the former captain became a hunter in the Rosebell Kingdom. She explains that a letter from him arrived at her house, saying he now hunts magical monsters. Mari grabs a glass of water and wonders if this new hunter job pays well. Will also grabs a glass and says that from the letter, their friend doesn't seem to have financial problems. The knight continues, saying it sounds like a much better work environment than their old one. He comments that being a hunter might suit Ash better, and the girl agrees with the idea. Suddenly, Ruka announces with a strange smile that she is leaving the Knights for good. Murray is shocked and asks if she's going after the former captain, and the blonde confirms she is. Then Will also reveals he's leaving to take over his family's merchant business. The red-haired young woman complains that the place will get boring but soon seems to have an idea. She stands up excitedly and says she's also going to become a hunter because it sounds fun. At this, a dark and jealous aura surrounds Uruka, who doesn't like the news. Mary asks which city in the kingdom the protagonist is in, and the blonde continues with her cold stare. With a malicious smile on her face, Uruka reveals he's in the first dungeon city. The red-haired girl invites her to go together, but she immediately refuses the offer. The blonde explains that she first needs to talk to her family before she can leave for there. With that, the three join together and declare that the 13th unit is officially disbanded. The scene then takes us to the Hunters Association, a place with a very rustic appearance. Inside, the receptionist greets him with a good morning, and he recognizes her from the other day. She asks if he came to process his registration, and the young man confirms he did. The girl gets excited and says his performance the other day was incredible and that she's happy. She then introduces herself as May, and the protagonist replies a bit awkwardly that the pleasure is his. With that, the receptionist hands him some forms to fill out there at the counter. After a while, the former knight finishes filling out the papers and hands them in with a smile. May takes the documents and, with a wink, tells him to wait a moment for the registration. A few minutes later, she returns and hands his new hunter's license in a small box. The young woman explains that he must show it when entering and leaving the dungeon, and he asks why. She says that if someone doesn't return, they send a search party, which reassures him. Next, May explains that all monster materials must be turned over to the association. With that, she says that taking furs to make a winter coat is strictly forbidden. The other rule is that hunters cannot renounce their citizenship, so as not to leak information. The young man asks about traveling, and the receptionist says it's safer to avoid it for now. She then finishes the explanation and welcomes him to the Hunters Association. Ash thanks her and, with a confident smile, says he will do his best in his new job. The scene then changes and shows us the entrance to the city's second dungeon on a sunny day. The protagonist walks alone down the street toward his first job as a hunter. A guard at the entrance then asks if he wishes to enter the dungeon now. With that, the former knight confirms and shows his new license for the man to check. The guard confirms the license and lets him pass, so the young man thanks him and moves on. But suddenly, another hunter bumps into his back on purpose, making him turn around. On impact, the protagonist's license falls onto the stone ground of the entrance. The man then picks up the card and apologizes in a rather sarcastic way. His group approaches and points out the beginner's mark on the former knight's license. Then the bully says that if he doesn't want to get taken out, he'd better stick to the lower floors. The group of hunters leaves laughing, and Ash wonders what's wrong with those guys. Ignoring the taunt, he puts on his gloves, excited to start his new life as a hunter. With his sword on his back, the protagonist walks toward the dungeon entrance, very confident. Arriving on the first floor, he thinks he can explore the place calmly this time. Suddenly, the young man hears a noise and realizes there's a monster nearby, watching him. But he sees two boys celebrating because they got a magic stone from a slime. The former knight approaches and asks what such young hunters are doing there. One of the boys replies they are slime fishing, which leaves the protagonist very confused. The boy then explains that if you throw vegetables into the lake, the monsters come out to eat. And just like that, a slime approaches the carrot that serves as bait for the two boys. With this, they manage to lure the creature out of the water and bring it onto dry land. The other boy then uses a sword to pierce the monster's core and defeat it. At that, a small magic stone appears, and the former knight understands the concept of fishing. They say that slimes are docile, so they're perfect for earning a little extra money. The protagonist comments that the monsters here don't seem like a big deal, and the boys confirm it. The boy then suggests he go to the 10th floor if he's confident, and the young man agrees. But then the boy holds out his hand, and the protagonist is a bit confused by his gesture. With that, the boy asks for an information fee, leaving the former knight shocked by his attitude. The boy thanks him for the business while counting the money, and Ash waves awkwardly. With this, the protagonist realizes he also got fished by the clever boys. Composing himself, the young hunter decides it's time to go to the next floor of the dungeon. He gets excited and can't wait to see what monsters await him on the floors below. Meanwhile, the bully hunter from before seems to be very angry for some reason. With a furious look, he can't understand what's happening with those creatures. His group is then surrounded by several monsters with red eyes glowing in the darkness. The scene then takes us to the 4th floor, a place that is a vast, sunny green field. The protagonist is surprised to see a field and understands that the scenery changes on each floor. He looks up and is amazed that there's a sky even though they're on the 4th basement level. Suddenly, the former knight notices something moving in the tall grass nearby. Then a cute rabbit with a horn appears in front of him, and he finds the creature adorable. But suddenly, the creature turns and kicks his sword with surprising speed and force. The young hunter is completely surprised by the small creature's unexpected attack. He remembers that even if it's cute, it's still a monster and attacks it with his glowing magic sword. With the rabbit defeated, Ash celebrates his first official monster subjugation in the dungeon. The protagonist takes out a book to see the name of the creature he just defeated. In the book, he discovers it's a horned rabbit, and the name is exactly like its appearance. He then realizes the materials to turn in are the horn and the monster's magic stone. The young hunter then collects the items and puts them inside a small leather pouch. Ash holds the bag and thinks that this pouch is truly a mysterious item to use. But upon seeing the purchase price, he realizes that this monster's materials are very cheap. With this, he concludes that it's not worth fighting them, and he should head to the lower floors. Suddenly, a horde of horned rabbits appears in front of him with very threatening looks. Terrified, the protagonist starts running desperately to escape from the pile of rabbits. The narrator explains that a few things happened, and now he is on the 9th floor of the dungeon. His exploration continued without problems, and on the 10th floor, he faces the blue monkeys. Arriving on the 13th floor, the former knight takes a deep breath and thinks he's come a long way. He observes the place and wonders if after the field and the forest, it's now a cave. Suddenly, a frightening scream echoes through the corridor, and the young man turns in surprise. The protagonist realizes the sound is coming from deeper in and runs toward the noise. There, he finds the same group of hunters from the entrance, surrounded by several skeletons. The young hunter then remembers that they were the same guys he saw at the dungeon entrance. A giant skeleton with a red cape prepares to attack the leader of the hunter group. At this, the former knight shouts for them to be careful and charges with his glowing sword. He then manages to block the monster's blow in time, saving the hunter from the fatal attack. The protagonist then asks if the hunter is okay, and he confirms he is, a little shocked. Facing the monster, Ash thinks it's the first time he's seen a skeleton like that. With that, the young man charges and attacks the creature's body with a powerful blow from his sword. The attack hits its mark, and the skeleton's body shatters from the force of the impact. But even on the ground, the creature's eyes still glow, and it seems to be alive. The former knight wonders if the weak spot is the head and prepares a new attack with his weapon. He then delivers a powerful blow to the monster's skull with his shining blade. After the attack, the protagonist breathes a sigh of relief, thinking the battle is finally over. Suddenly, a purple magic stone begins to glow inside the fallen skeleton's chest. At this, the monster begins to repair itself, and the young hunter is shocked by the scene. He wonders if the creature is immortal but soon remembers that it's already lifeless, after all. The other hunters then shout that the weak spot is the magic stone in the heart area. Looking closer, Ash sees the glowing stone and understands that is his true target. The skeleton then rises again and charges with its sword to attack the protagonist. But the young man dodges the blow and counterattacks with a precise slash from his bluish blade. Then he readies himself and charges quickly attempt a direct attack on the monster's chest. With a precise punch, he strikes the skeleton's ribcage to grab the magic stone. His eyes glow, and he yanks out the stone with his hand, asking what the monster thinks of that. At this, the magic stone shatters in his hand, and the protagonist is satisfied with the result. Without its power source, the skeleton finally falls to the ground, completely defeated. The protagonist understands the monster's weak spot as he faces the remaining skeletons. He thinks that now that he knows how to defeat them, the battle will no longer be a big problem. With a confident smile on his face, the young hunter readies his sword for the next attack. He charges with his shining blade and hits another monster with a quick and precise blow. With another precise move, he destroys one more skeleton before the creature can react. With his eyes glowing, he unleashes an ability and defeats several enemies at once. After the fight, the protagonist breathes a sigh of relief amidst the finally defeated monsters. The group of hunters he saved then approaches and thanks him very much for all the help. The group leader recognizes him as the rookie from the entrance and is surprised by his strength. He then apologizes for mocking him, and Ash asks what happened to the group. The hunter explains that since the dungeon was quiet, they went deeper than usual. A flashback then shows the group walking through the cave corridors without a care. But suddenly, a skeleton attacked them by surprise, coming out of the shadows without warning. One of the group members shielded him from the blow but was severely injured in his place. They tried to fight but stood no chance against the horde of monsters that surrounded them. The girl in the group says they couldn't do anything and tends to her injured friend. The group leader shouts his friend's name, and Ash approaches to see the wound. The young man realizes the wound is serious and that the hunter's life is currently in danger. Suddenly, a giant shadow appears in the dark corridor, frightening everyone there. Shortly after, a new horde of skeletons appears, ready to attack the cornered group. The protagonist complains that more monsters have appeared while the girl helps him with their injured friend. With a worried look, the young hunter realizes the number of enemies is very large. The other hunters are also terrified and understand the situation is very complicated. Then the girl in the group yells for the former knight to watch out for the incoming attack. Ash turns, surprised by the warning, and prepares for the rapidly approaching danger. Shortly after, the horde of skeletons charges with their swords ready to attack the young man. The young hunter manages to destroy the body of one of the monsters with his shining sword, but to his surprise, the creatures begin to regenerate on their own right after. Annoyed, he realizes he needs to aim for the magic stone to defeat them once and for all. Ash then yells for the group to take the injured man and run while he holds off the enemies. With that, the former knight jumps and attacks another skeleton with a powerful aerial strike. He then kicks the monster's body away after hitting its chest with his sword. But the young man complains that he can't aim for the stones because there are too many enemies together. The protagonist realizes they are completely surrounded and the situation is very bad. Not knowing what to do, he wonders what the best way out of this predicament would be. Suddenly, the former knight seems to have an idea, and his eyes widen with a memory. A memory then shows him buying a longsword and a breastplate in a shop. The protagonist says his equipment is now perfect and the vendor gives him a freebie. The man explains that it's a smoke bomb that repels monsters and could be useful. The young man then takes the item and wonders if it really works as the man said. Back in the present, Ash desperately searches his pockets for the smoke bomb. With a relieved smile, the former knight finally finds the item that could save them. He then says he has no choice but to try and throws the bomb with all his strength. The bomb flies quickly toward the horde of skeletons and explodes with a blue flash. The item hits one of the monsters right in the face and white smoke begins to spread. The smoke covers the entire area, and the group waits anxiously to see the result of the attack. The former knight wonders if it will work, because if not, they are completely done for. With his hands clasped, he pleads for the item to work and save them from this situation. The smoke begins to clear, and the skeletons seem to have stopped moving for some reason. Seeing that it worked, the group celebrates and says the item is incredible for stopping the monsters. But Ash shouts that there's no time to celebrate and tells them to run while they can. With that, the protagonist carries the injured hunter, and they all run to escape the danger. After a while, the young man says the monsters probably won't follow them this far. The injured hunter laments that his arm might be lost, and Ash approaches to help. The protagonist then starts bandaging the man's arm to try to stop the bleeding. He takes out a potion and says he's going to pour it into the hunter's mouth to help him heal. With that, Ash forces the man's mouth open and pours the green liquid in to save him. The potion works and the bleeding slows down, so Ash tells him to take him to the surface. The scene then takes us to the city, where the clock tower glows under the sunset light. With that, the group leaves the dungeon carrying their injured friend, and the protagonist shouts for a doctor. Soon after, some medics arrive and take the hunter on a stretcher to the hospital. Tired, Ash sits on a couch and thinks his job is done, and the rest is up to the doctor. The group leader then apologizes and offers a reward, but the young man refuses on the spot. The former knight says it's natural to help each other, and tells them not to worry about it. An hour later, a doctor comes out of the room, and the group anxiously asks how their friend is. The doctor explains that the potion saved his life, which relieves the girl in the group. But he reveals they couldn't save his arm, and the leader says just surviving is enough. Ash agrees, saying that as long as you're alive, anything is possible, and they'll find him a job. Seeing their friendship, the protagonist thinks with a smile that he's envious of that feeling. At this, he remembers his old team, the Janus unit, and wonders what they are doing. A month passes, and a hunter in a tavern asks Ash if he's not going to join a party. Two muscular men invite him to their party, but the young man says he prefers to be alone. The hunter says he heard he was also invited by the elite party, Golden Knight. Ash comments that the party leader is skilled, but his gestures are very annoying. Suddenly, another man says that a named monster is roaming the 14th floor. The protagonist is curious and asks what that is, and the man explains it's a rare creature. He says that Dullahan, the headless horseman, has appeared and caused a big commotion there. The hunter says named monsters are strong, and Ash agrees it would be too much for him alone. Suddenly, a mysterious woman's feet appear in the tavern, drawing everyone's attention. The men in the place are enchanted by the beauty of the young woman, who just arrived at the bar. All the customers stare at the beautiful blonde woman walking elegantly through the hall. Ash's friend insists again for him to join his party, but the young man refuses once more. Suddenly, a hand covers his eyes and a female voice asks who is there. The former knight recognizes the voice and is completely shocked when he turns to see who it is. In a white dress and with a smile on her face, Uruka appears before him by surprise. With a loving look, the girl says she came to see him and calls him senior, as always. The scene then changes, and the two are shown sitting at a table outside at night. The protagonist asks what she's doing there, and the girl doesn't understand his question. With a smile, she says she came for him, which leaves the young hunter very surprised. He then asks about the knights, and Ruka reveals she quit without a second thought. Ash asks how her family let her go, and she answers with a somewhat strange look. The young woman reveals she cut ties with her family, and the protagonist spits out his coffee in shock. She explains that when she said she was going to Rosebell, her father challenged her to a fight. Yuruka says she fought her father and completely defeated him to gain her freedom. The girl reveals she decided to become a hunter to be by his side forever. With the sudden declaration, the former knight becomes completely flustered and doesn't know what to say. With a wink, she says being a hunter and a fiancé at the same time is perfectly fine. Awkwardly, the protagonist tries to ask something, but Aruka encourages him to continue with a smile. He thinks he would fall for her, but his mind is a little confused with his feelings. At this, he remembers his ex-fiancée and the fear he has of being betrayed again. Then, with a forced smile on his face, the young man says it was nothing and changes the subject. Yuruka then looks at him with a worried expression and calls his name with a serious look. Soon after, she holds his hand gently and says he is a pitiful person. The girl becomes furious and says it's the fault of that ugly woman who hurt his heart. With that, she stands up and promises that she will never leave him alone, no matter what. Yuruka then says she will bet her life on it, leaving the protagonist shocked by her declaration. Next, she gets closer and says she's glad the other one didn't take him away for good. She then hugs him and says she will wait as long as it takes for him to sort himself out. The young man spits out his drink and wonders if she really was always this type of girl. Awkwardly, he suggests they go back to the inn, and she agrees with a smile. As they walk, the former knight asks if she managed to find lodging for them. The protagonist then points in one direction and says he's going that way. With that, the two walk together toward a large inn on the city's main street. The young hunter is confused to see the girl is following him to the same place. To his surprise, they both end up stopping in front of the same room door at the inn. The girl then pushes him into the room and quickly closes the door behind them. At this, the protagonist panics while Yuruka seems very happy with the situation. The protagonist wonders why she is there, and Yuruka explains she asked at the guild. She then locks the door and says this shows how serious she is about the matter. The girl jumps into his arms and says that from now on, they'll be together forever. With that, she gets closer and whispers in his ear, calling him senior once again. The former knight becomes completely flustered and speechless at his friend's bold move. The scene then changes to outside the inn, indicating that the night has finally passed. The next morning, the young man is sitting on the bed while Ruka is still sleeping peacefully. He prides himself on his patience, and the girl wakes up, saying good morning with a smile. She then holds his hand and says he held up well during the night. But that was just the beginning. With a confident look, the young woman says she won't rush things and knows how to wait. Even so, she teases him, saying that one day she'll make him lay his hands on her one way or another. Yuruka then pulls him and tells him to get ready because she needs to get her hunter's license. Tired, the protagonist laments that if this continues, he'll end up with insomnia. The two then go to the guild so the girl can register as a new hunter. Arriving there, the young man says good morning to the receptionist, May, who greets him back. Suddenly, the blonde appears next to him and says good morning to the receptionist, who gets startled. Uruka says she came to get her license, and Mai glares at her and starts to growl. The receptionist asks them to wait a moment, and the former knight smiles victoriously. The protagonist then asks if something is wrong, and Uruka hugs him with a strange look. She explains she sensed that May liked him, so she decided to give her a little warning. Angrily, May slaps the license on the counter, and Uruka thanks her in a very cynical way. The receptionist then glares at her with a furious look and says she won't lose, no matter what. With a victorious smile, the former knight replies that she can do whatever she wants. The two glare at each other with sparks flying from their eyes, and the protagonist despairs over the fight. To calm the situation, Ash says they need to go to the dungeon, and the blonde agrees immediately. At the dungeon entrance, the young man says that with Uruka's skill, they can go deeper. With that, the pair advances quickly and reaches the 10th floor of the dangerous place. There, they encounter blue monkeys, and the former knight asks his friend to fight alone. The creatures then roar fiercely, showing their sharp fangs to the new hunter. Shortly after, the monsters charge as a pack to try and attack the girl all at once. But Ruka remains calm and readies her bow with a serious look for the fight to come. She then fires a powerful energy arrow that flies toward her enemies. The protagonist watches the fight from a distance, and is a little surprised by his friend's skill. The young woman then quickly grabs 3 more arrows from her quiver to continue the attack. With a determined look, she prepares her bow to fire all 3 arrows at once. The powerful attack advances like a blast of light and hits the blue monkeys dead on. Ash is impressed and says her precision and skill have improved a lot, but the situation gets complicated as more creatures jump from the trees to join the fight. The former knight then shouts for her to switch to close quarters combat, and the young woman agrees. With that, the new hunter puts away her bow and draws a dagger to fight them up close. With her eyes glowing red, the girl charges and cuts off the monster's head. The creature then screams in pain from the precise blow it receives from its opponent. The young woman then does a backflip and finishes off the monkey with a precise dagger attack. Yuruka climbs on top of another monster and defeats it with a powerful downward strike. Ash is proud and thinks that her close quarters combat is also impressive. After defeating the monsters, the former knight waves to her friend with a victorious smile. The protagonist then smiles and says he's proud his junior has gotten so strong. With that, the hunter duel leaves the dungeon after a very intense day of training. He praises the girl for improving, and she asks him to praise her even more. With a smile, the young man suggests they try the 13th floor the next day. Suddenly, one of the boys from the slime fishing appears running and shouting his name. The boy arrives out of breath and says a named monster has appeared in the dungeon and they need help. The news shocks the former knight, who is left speechless upon learning that Dolahan is there. The scene then takes us to the Hunters Guild, where everyone is agitated by the news. A girl with a teddy bear in her arms trembles with fear while sitting in a chair. The receptionist Maya explains that the girl's party encountered the monster on the 14th floor. The boy reveals that she is the sole survivor, and that more than 10 people didn't make it back. The protagonist then kneels in front of her and asks if she can tell him what happened. Terrified, the girl says the monster's sword suddenly moved on its own and attacked them. Ash asks what happened to the sword, but the young woman starts crying, unable to answer. The protagonist says she's in no condition to talk, and the receptionist asks what to do. Yuruka says they need to recover the bodies, and Mai asks if it's for their burial. But the former knight explains it's to gather information about the monster from the wounds. Meanwhile, the surviving girl is taken away by the guards, still in a state of shock. The protagonist agrees it would be difficult to get information from her in that state. With that, he asks if a named monster is really that strong, and Mai becomes concerned. She explains that the red monkey from 3 years ago required all the elite hunters. Mai says the association will form a recovery team but will need an escort. The fishing boy says if they encounter the monster, the mission is over for them. The protagonist then becomes thoughtful and remembers the hunter he saved in the dungeon. He then calls the receptionist's name with a serious look and volunteers for the mission. With a determined look, Ash says he will go as an escort for the recovery team. The next day, a base is set up in front of the second dungeon for the mission to begin. There, the protagonist meets with the team and explains that the destination is the 14th floor. A hunter asks what they'll do if they encounter the monster, and Ash says they'll run. But the other hunters laugh and say they could probably defeat the creature. The young man then tells Iruka to wait at the inn, but she hugs him from behind and refuses. The girl points at him and shouts that she won't be a burden, which makes him awkwardly agree. With a determined look, the protagonist tells the team it's time to begin. With that, the entire group advances together toward the dungeon entrance for the mission. Right on the first floor, the group encounters some skeletons, but the protagonist acts quickly. He shouts that the enemy are skeleton soldiers, and everyone prepares for the battle to come. The creatures advance with their swords and red eyes glowing in the cave's darkness. Ash says the priority is recovery and for them to destroy the stones and keep going. He then asks Iruka to shoot the magic stones, and the girl says she'll try. The former knight then fires a powerful energy arrow that destroys the monsters. One of the hunters praises the girl's skill, and everyone is impressed by her power. Another member says that with her around, the path to the 14th floor will be easy. But suddenly, a strange noise startles everyone, and they stop to see what it is. The team then continues its way through the dark dungeon corridors cautiously. The team continues running through the dark cave corridors to reach their destination. Arriving at the location, the group is shocked to see the scene that awaits them. 2 hunters are fighting Dullahan, the headless horseman, who appeared by surprise. With imposing armor and a blue flame on its neck, the creature looks very powerful. The monster then raises its flaming sword and prepares to attack the 2 hunters. It then delivers a powerful blow that the men try to defend against with their weapons. But the force of the attack is too great, and the hunters are thrown back by the impact. The monster then attacks again with its flaming sword, giving them no chance to react. With a single fiery blow, the headless horseman defeats all the other enemies. The protagonist is shocked, as the monster wasn't supposed to be on this dungeon floor. The protagonist wonders what kind of weapon that is and how its blade is on fire. He then sees the hunters' bodies melting like candy from the heat of the fire. With his eyes glowing purple, the young man wonders how he could fight that monster. Suddenly, the headless horseman turns toward the group watching the scene. One of the hunters shouts that they've been spotted and tells everyone to retreat immediately. The protagonist is a little confused, as the monster doesn't seem to be moving toward them. The headless horseman simply stands in the same spot, staring at the group from a distance. The monster then sticks its flaming sword into the ground and waits for some kind of movement. Ash is confused by the creature's attitude and doesn't understand what it's doing. He realizes the gesture resembles the etiquette of a duel between knights and is surprised. With wide eyes, the young man wonders if the monster is waiting for him to draw his sword. A memory then shows the protagonist fighting his friend Bale in a duel in the past. The two smile with the thrill of combat and face each other with all their strength. Ash remembers the thrill of fighting with a single blow and how exciting it was for him. With a sinister smile on his face, the former knight seems to be enjoying the situation. With that, he draws his dagger and says he missed that feeling from his life as a knight. Iruka shouts his name worriedly and tries to stop him from doing something so crazy. The girl says that everyone's safety comes first, but the young man doesn't seem to hear. The protagonist then apologizes with an awkward smile and runs to face the monster. With that, Ash and Iruka run into the cave to face the powerful Dullahan. The headless horseman stands still with its sword stuck in the ground, waiting for its opponent. The hunters who fled comment that only the knights could defeat a monster like that. Iruka then notices her friend is smiling and looks at him, a bit confused by the scene. The girl says he's smiling and the protagonist is surprised because he hadn't noticed. He then touches his face and realizes he really was wearing an excited smile. The young man remembers that one false step against an opponent like that means the end of the line. With an excited look, he wonders if he actually really wants to fight this monster. The scene then changes and shows us the inn where they are staying during the night. Iruka takes a relaxing bath to prepare for what's to come the next day. Meanwhile, Ash is sitting on his bed, thinking about how he's going to face that creature. The young man seems very thoughtful and worried about the difficult battle that awaits him. The next morning, one of the hunters from the recovery team reports what happened in the dungeon. The receptionist Mai is shocked to learn that the monster's sword was on fire. The other hunters say there's no way to defeat the creature because their weapons melt. Because of this, the receptionist suggests they give up on recovering the bodies for now. One of the men says to call the knights, but she explains it's not possible. The young woman then asks if there's nothing they can do with just the hunters. At this, the receptionist calls the protagonist's name with a rather serious look. With a light glowing around her, she asks the former knight to accept the subjugation mission. Ash then looks a bit awkward and speechless at the receptionist's sudden request. Yuruka then holds his arm with a worried look about her friend's decision. She looks at him and seems not to agree with the idea of him accepting such a dangerous mission. The protagonist then asks for some time to think, and the receptionist agrees with a smile. With a gentle look on her face, Mei says of course he can have some time to decide. Back at the inn, the young woman gets out of the bath, drying her blonde hair with a towel. The former knight then calls her name and prepares to talk about the mission. He says he has something to talk about, and the girl sits on the bed to listen attentively. Haruka asks what it is, and the protagonist seems a bit hesitant to talk about it. But with courage, the young man reveals that he wants to fight the Headless Horseman from the dungeon. He explains it's not a mission or an obligation, but his own will to fight. Ash then turns to the girl and starts to say something, but she interrupts him immediately. The young woman squeezes his face and scolds him for thinking she wouldn't go with him on the mission. She says that's exactly what she's talking about and asks why he's always like this with her. Yuruka squeezes his face even harder and says she's hurt that he would think she wouldn't go. The former knight remembers a conversation they had in the past when they were with the Empire. Back then, he said he might not come back, but she replied that she would follow him anyway. With a confident smile, the girl says that no matter what happens, she will always be there. The protagonist is speechless, and the young woman continues her speech with great determination. She scolds him again and says he won't lose to a fake knight like that one. With a loving look, she says she won't leave him alone and looks at him very closely. The girl says she wants to discuss what they'll do after they win and rests his head on her lap. The young man then suggests they eat at a fancy restaurant with the mission's reward. Yuruka says food is good, but she has another idea in mind for the celebration. With a somewhat mischievous smile, the girl says she wants a reward when it's all over. The protagonist asks what kind of reward it would be, and the young woman confirms with a confident look. With that, he agrees, and the girl celebrates excitedly for getting his word. The next day, the two go to a weapons shop to prepare for the great battle. The young man says a thick shield would be too heavy and would hinder his movements in the fight. He explains that the only way is to confuse it with speed and use hit and run tactics. The former knight then remembers that both the armor and the sword melt in the flames. The shopkeeper says if they melt, they just have to accept they're disposable and use others. The protagonist is then surprised, as he hadn't thought of that option before coming there. With a smile, he understands this is a good alternative to his current problem. The two then head to the 13th floor of the dungeon with their backpacks on. Arriving there, the young man spots the Headless Horseman standing amidst several skeletons. The monster is in the same spot as before and seems to have been waiting for him the whole time. The protagonist's eye glows red, and he seems very focused on the battle to come. He notices the number of bodies on the ground has increased and gets angry at the situation. At this, the former knight prepares for the fight and takes something out of his backpack to use. He takes several packages from his bag, preparing for his hit and run strategy. With his strategy in mind, the young hunter says he's ready for the fight and charges forward. He then shouts for Ruka to go, and the two run together to face the Dullahan. The former knight leaps for an aerial attack, while his friend readies her bow for support. Yuruka then fires a bluish energy arrow with all her strength toward the monster, but the Headless Horseman deflects the attack with its sword, creating an energy explosion. Ash takes advantage of the distraction and comes down with a powerful blow to hit the creature from above. The monster then notices the aerial attack and prepares to defend against the incoming blow. With a loud noise, the two swords clash and a large explosion of light occurs. The protagonist is surprised as he realizes the enemy isn't using its flames in the fight. The Headless Horseman uses its strength and manages to push the young hunter to the ground. With a powerful blow, the creature attacks and breaks the young man's sword with a single move. Feeling the pressure of the attack, the former knight grinds his teeth at his opponent's strength. Seeing her friend in danger, Aruka shouts his name and fires another arrow to help him. The arrow hits the monster's sword and creates a small opening for the young man to recover. At this, the girl asks if he's okay, and Ash pants, a little tired from the battle. With a serious look, he realizes the monster still isn't using its flames in the fight. He understands the creature seems to be enjoying the duel and isn't fighting seriously. With a slight smile, the protagonist finds the situation interesting and grabs a new sword. The young man then stands up and, with a challenging look, asks if they can continue the fight. The Headless Horseman raises its sword, accepting the challenge for the next round. The Headless Horseman then prepares for the fight and advances with its sword in hand. In a swift movement, the creature points its blade at the young hunter in front of it. The former knight repeats the gesture and faces his opponent with a serious and very determined look. Enveloped in a blue aura, the young man charges with his magic sword for a new attack. He then lands a powerful punch right on the horseman's helmet, which feels the impact. But the monster retaliates and manages to stop the young man's blade with its own hand. With a focused look, the protagonist notices the creature didn't use its fire sword. Ash then quickly retreats while his opponent prepares a new blow with its weapon. Yuruka says she'll provide support, but the former knight yells for her to wait a little longer. With a surprised look, he understands that this creature is no ordinary monster. Its movements and fighting style are exactly like those of a real knight. To test his theory, the protagonist decides to do something completely unexpected. With a formal gesture, he introduces himself to the monster as Ash, a former knight of the Empire. The creature then stumps its feet on the ground as if responding to his greeting. The protagonist recognizes this as the greeting of the Rosebell Kingdom and is surprised. With a smile, he confirms that this Dullahan is indeed a knight from that kingdom. The young man then turns and calls Aruka's name, who looks at him, confused by the situation. He says he's going to fight one, and asks her not to interfere in the battle. Then Ash faces the monster and regrets not being able to know its real name for the duel. But he promises he will make the world remember the strength of that noble knight. With a battle cry, the protagonist charges with his sword, ready for the next attack. He then delivers a powerful blow and hits the horseman's chest with his bluish blade. The young hunter's attack manages to create a small crack in his opponent's armor. Ash realizes the enemy is very resilient and already starts thinking about his next move. With that, he says he will keep attacking until he can break the monster's defense. Next, the former knight delivers another precise blow in the same spot to increase the damage. The crack in the creature's armor then starts to get bigger and bigger with the attacks. With a slight smile, the young man says it seems his opponent isn't invincible after all. The headless horseman then puts its hand on its chest and observes the damage it received to its armor. Suddenly, it sticks its sword into the ground with force, and a strange energy appears around it. With that, the weapon's blade begins to catch fire with an intense and very reddish flame. The monster then raises its flaming sword, preparing to finally fight seriously. Aruka is shocked and shouts that the enemy is finally using its powerful fire sword. With a smirk, Ash says the fun is over and that this is very interesting. The creature charges with its flaming weapon, and the real battle is finally about to begin. The protagonist then defends against the fiery blow with his own bluish magic sword. But the heat is so strong that his shoulder guard catches fire, and he shouts in pain. He rips off the flaming piece of armor and throws it on the ground, saying that was a close call. The headless horseman then prepares to attack the young man, who is now at a disadvantage. Even so, the former knight prepares to defend against the next blow with all his might. The protagonist looks in shock at his sword, which begins to melt from the intense heat. With that, the headless horseman raises its flaming weapon to deliver the final blow. Seeing the scene, Aruka shouts her friend's name, desperate about the dangerous situation. But with a confident smile on his face, the former knight seems to have a plan in mind. He then defends against the flaming attack with a powerful blast of energy and great force. The creature looks at him for a moment, waiting to see what his next move will be. With a slight smile, the young man says he also came prepared for this great fight. He shows a bag and says it's a magical item storage tool. Next, the protagonist throws the bag into the air, and several swords emerge from within it. The weapons fall and stick into the ground, and he asks if the monster will burn them all, or if he will manage to break his opponent's magic stone before that happens. The young man then picks up one of the new swords from the ground to continue the battle. Surrounded by weapons, the former knight challenges the Dullahan to a real duel there. With that, he leaps with two swords to attack the headless horseman from above. The blow hits the monster's chest dead on, right in the crack he made before. But the protagonist's sword can't withstand the heat and breaks from the impact of the blow. Ash uses the momentum to grab another weapon as the monster retreats from the attack. He then runs to attack again with his new sword in a swift movement. The headless horseman retaliates with a horizontal slash from its flaming blade. With that, the attack hits the young man dead on with a fiery explosion that sends him flying. His new sword also can't take it and breaks in the middle from the intense heat of the fire. With that, the young hunter uses the impact to slide back and grab another weapon. He then readies himself for the fight again and picks up another sword that was on the ground. The protagonist shouts that now there are only 4 swords left and prepares for the attack. In a swift movement, he throws the weapon like a spear toward the monster, but the headless horseman easily deflects the attack with its flaming blade. The former knight then throws more swords and shouts that now there are only 3 left for him. The creature then prepares itself and unleashes an even more powerful wave of fire than the last. With that, the monster charges with a devastating blow that covers the entire area in flames. Ash is completely surprised by the power of the attack and can't react in time. The fiery explosion then hits him head-on, raising a curtain of smoke and dust. Haruka watches it all desperately and shouts her friend's name, worried about him. But to everyone's surprise, the protagonist emerges from the flames without a scratch. The young hunter stands firm and faces his opponent with a serious and determined look. With his eyes glowing, he knows this is his last chance to win the battle. He then throws his last 2 swords into the air to prepare his final attack. With a red glove on his hand, the young man grabs his last weapon for the decisive blow. The headless horseman charges quickly to try and end the fight once and for all. The creature then spins and delivers a circular fire attack with all its might. But Ash leaps over the flames for a final aerial attack against his opponent. With his eyes glowing red, the protagonist shouts that he will settle this now. He then attacks with all his might, and the 2 swords clash with a tremendous impact. With the powerful blow, the magic stone in the monster's chest finally begins to crack. The former knight then lands safely as his opponent retreats from the damage of the attack. The Dullahan puts its hand on its chest, feeling the damage it received from its opponent in the fight. But Ash realizes he didn't destroy the stone and now only has 1 sword left to fight with. The monster then rises again, but the flame on its sword has almost disappeared. Next, the creature holds its sword by the blade and offers the hilt to the young man. The protagonist is completely confused, not understanding what the monster is doing. He then asks if the weapon is for him, still not believing the enemy's action. The creature extends its arm even further, confirming it wants him to take the weapon. The young man then accepts the offer and holds the sword's hilt along with the headless horseman. The monster stands still, showing the weak spot on its chest for the protagonist to attack. Ash holds the enormous sword and asks if the creature wants him to end it all there. He thinks that if his opponent were human, that last attack would have been fatal. The young man then closes his eyes and wonders if the thrill of the duel is already over. With a look of respect, he bids farewell to the Black Knight, acknowledging his honor. With a final blow, he strikes the cracked magic stone in the monster's chest with everything he has. The creature's head lifts for a moment as it receives the hero's final attack. With that, the monster's body finally falls to the ground, completely defeated by him. Tired, Ash breathes a sigh of relief beside the monster's fallen body and says it's finally over. The scene then takes us to the Hunters Guild on a starry and very quiet night. The receptionist May and the others are shocked and ask if he really defeated the Dullahan. The protagonist and Iruka smile victoriously with the monster's items and confirm the great victory. Back at the guild, the hunters praise him, and he says the rest of the armor is in the bag. May despairs at the news and shouts for the young hunter not to do anything foolish. She tells him to keep everything until the knights arrive, and the young man awkwardly agrees. The receptionist then orders them to call Bale and prepare the largest room for the items. Ash comments that things seem more difficult now, and Iruka agrees with a smile. His friend Bale then arrives and congratulates him, saying he knew he could do it. The former knight is happy to see him and asks if he only came to check the materials. The noble explains that named items require witnesses from the knights and the association. The young man complains that it sounds like a hassle, and his friend asks to see the monster's items. With that, the complete Dullahan armor is assembled in a large hall for inspection. Bale's companion then analyzes every detail of the armor with a small magnifying glass. He confirms that it is the Black Knight's armor, and the noble listens attentively. Bale takes the sword and says the armor is valuable, but the weapon is a very rare item. Suddenly, the sword catches fire in his hands, and he reveals it's a magic sword. The receptionist and the other man are completely shocked by the knight's revelation. The protagonist then asks what a magic sword is, and everyone stares at him in surprise. Bale explains that it's a magical weapon that doesn't need a stone to work. He says it's the 5th time one of these has been found, and May calls it a historic discovery. The noble says he might receive a letter of appreciation and also a handsome reward. He then asks the two to write a report about the battle with the Dullahan. His friend hands them 2 clipboards and says the items will go to a research institute. The two take the reports, and Ruka asks what this institute is. Bale explains it's an organization that studies the mysteries of dungeons and magic. With everything settled, the knight then calls the protagonist with a very serious look. With a focused expression, he asks his friend what the Headless Horseman was like. Ash then looks back at him and says there's no mistake about its identity. The young man confirms that the creature was undoubtedly a true armored knight. The noble says he knew it and reveals the armor resembles that of ancient knights. At this, he wonders if a human can turn into a monster and what the institute will think. The protagonist laments not knowing his name, and Bale asks if the enemy was strong. With a determined look, the former knight confirms that he was very strong. Ash finishes by saying he was a magnificent knight of the kingdom, looking at the armor. The receptionist Mai then takes the reports and congratulates the two on their good work. The young man stretches and complains it took longer than expected, as it's already night. Tired, he suggests they go to the inn to rest, and Iruka agrees with the idea. But suddenly, a group of hunters appears and invites them to a celebration party. The protagonist and Iruka are a bit awkward with the group's sudden invitation, but they end up accepting and go to a tavern to celebrate with the other hunters. With a cheerful toast, everyone celebrates the great victory over the named monster. The hunters say that from now on, he will be called Ash the Dullahan Hunter. With a smile, the young man thinks this new nickname is much better than the Vanquisher. One of the men then asks if the two have decided on a name for their party yet. The protagonist takes a sip of his drink and looks thoughtful at the question. At this, he remembers his old knight unit and the name they created. The young man gives a slight smile as he remembers the good times with his old team. He then says they decided that a long time ago and asks if Ruka remembers. The girl confirms with a smile on her face and seems very excited about his idea. The other hunters are confused, as they have no idea what they're talking about. With that, the two reveal that the name of their party is the Jaina Squad, just like before. The scene then changes to a train station on a clear and very sunny day. There, a red-haired girl shouts excitedly that they finally reached their destination. With her hands on her hips, she says the train ride wasn't as bad as she thought. With an excited smile, the young woman reveals that this is the kingdom's first dungeon city. With a determined look, she tells Ash and Iruka to wait because she's coming. The girl then walks happily through the city, saying she'll become a hunter and earn money. She dreams of drinking, gambling, and having a lot of fun with all the money she's going to make. Arriving in the city, the red-haired girl goes straight to the Hunters Association. Inside, some men comment that the newcomer is a very beautiful woman. With a mischievous smile, one of them says he'd like to get closer to the mysterious young woman. The young woman then goes to the counter and tells the receptionist she's looking for someone. She asks for a hunter named Ash, but the attendant doesn't seem to know the name. The young woman says there's no one like that there, and the redhead is shocked because Iruka said there was. Suddenly, she remembers her friend's malicious smile and realizes she was tricked. With a sinister laugh in her mind, the young woman understands it was all just a plan. Furious, she slams the counter and shouts that the blonde lied to be alone with Ash. With her eyes on fire, the girl says her plan to get rich won't end here. She asks where else there's an association, and the young woman says there are 2 other cities. Thoughtfully, the raid head decides she'll start by searching the nearest city. But suddenly, the young woman realizes a problem and looks at the attendant with a question. She then shows her money and asks if she can get a train with that amount. The receptionist says it's not enough, and the girl despairs at the situation. Suddenly, a voice calls her cutie, and the young woman turns to see who it is. It's the same group of hunters, who offer to lend her some money. The group leader approaches and says he can help her, but he wants something in return. With a malicious smile, he then puts his hand on the young woman's shoulder to provoke her. But the girl just gives a slight smile and lands a powerful punch on his face. The bully screams in pain and is sent flying while his friends are shocked by the scene. With her eye glowing red, the girl then charges to attack the next enemy. Next, she lands a powerful kick to the face of another aggressor, who doesn't react. The last man remaining is terrified to see his friend on the ground, defeated. The young woman then faces him with her glowing eye, preparing for the final attack. With that, she lands another precise kick on the last man to end the fight. After the fight, all the aggressors end up on the ground, completely defeated. But the group leader gets up furiously and yells at the girl for her attitude. He then tries to punch her, but the raid head easily dodges the blow. She then retaliates with a powerful kick right in the aggressor's stomach, who doesn't react. To finish it, the young woman lands a spinning kick to the man's face with all her might. At this, he spits and falls to the ground defeated, and she complains that she's already very irritated. With a furious look, the girl shouts for them to leave and not to bother her anymore. The receptionist who is watching is shocked and says the young woman is incredible. She then suggests the redhead become a hunter since she's out of money and is strong. The girl thinks about the idea and realizes it's the perfect solution to her problem. With a determined look, she says she will save up money to go after her friends. Meanwhile, 2 days later, Ash and Yuruka are walking together through the city peacefully. Suddenly, the girl calls her friend's name, and he turns to see what it is. It was Bale, who greets him and says he's escorting the Dullahan's items to the capital. Bale then gets a little closer to whisper something to the protagonist in secret. He reveals there was an inscription on the armor, and Ash is very shocked by the news. The noble says he was a royal knight who never returned from the dungeon a long time ago. The young man then wonders if he'll end up like him if he passes away inside that place. Ash says the armor and sword will be useful for research, and his friend agrees. Bale says the reward from the capital depends on the evaluation and says goodbye to the group. The protagonist then suggests they go to the association, and the girl nods in agreement. The scene then takes us to the Hunters Guild with a very loud sound of surprise. The receptionist Mai reveals their reward is 5 million, and the two are shocked. They do the math and realize it's 2.5 million each, which is a lot. Mai then says they've been named exclusive hunters of the second dungeon city. Ash asks if that's a big deal, and she says they will receive various special treatments. With an excited smile, the receptionist asks them to continue defeating monsters. The scene then changes to the inn on a starry and tranquil night. Ash holds a glass of a drink and seems to be thinking about everything that happened that day. Alone in the room, he wonders how he should use all the money he's earned. Suddenly, Ruka calls him senior, and he turns to see what the girl wants. She hugs him from behind and asks about the reward he promised her before. With a blushing face, the young man says he hasn't forgotten, and the girl seems very satisfied. With a mischievous smile, Ruka sits on the bed and asks him to come to her. Awkwardly, the protagonist approaches the bed, but still a bit hesitant about the situation. The two then look at each other very closely, their hearts beating very fast in their chests. With a blushing face, the young man prepares for what's to come, but the girl surprises him. Yuruka then lays him on the bed with a smile and gets on top of him with a mischievous look. The young woman then gets closer with a blushing face and seems very happy with the moment. The protagonist becomes completely flustered and speechless at his friend's bold move. She then teaches him how to place his arm comfortably so she can lie down. With that, the girl lies down next to him and hugs him with a loving smile on her face. With a mischievous look, she says that from that day on, she wants him to be her pillow. Ash asks if that's all, and she teases him, asking if the young man was disappointed. Yuruka says she'll wait but wonders if she's not being a bit sneaky with him. With a smile, he says no and that he actually likes her way of being. The young man then pats her head and hugs her with a very loving look. He says she is important to him and asks her to stay by his side forever. With a blushing face, the girl says of course she'll stay with him and hugs him very tightly. She promises to stay by his side and prove her love forever, looking at the starry sky. A week after the Dullahan's subjugation, their lives as hunters continue. The two then fight together as the Janus squad against the dungeon's monsters. Now they can easily handle the Bone Warriors on the 15th floor. The protagonist then wonders what the 16th floor will be like and what awaits them there. The former knight then suggests they take a look at the new floor, and the two go down the stairs. Arriving on the 16th floor, the duo is shocked to see a huge sunny desert. The place is incredibly vast and stretches for miles with a blue sky above. The girl asks if they are still in the dungeon, and the young man says the place is very wide. The young man says dungeons are mysterious, and the two continue to explore carefully. Suddenly, a giant flying monster appears in the sky along with several smaller ones. One of the creatures then dives quickly toward them for a surprise attack. The protagonist prepares for battle and draws his sword to face the threat. With a quick slash of his blade, he hits the creature and shouts that it's coming. The monster screams in pain from the impact, but doesn't seem to have been defeated by the attack. The larger creature then attacks and fires its feathers as if they were missiles at them. The young man throws himself to the ground to dodge the projectiles that stick into the earth with force. The feathers then begin to glow with intense energy, preparing to explode. With a large explosion, the young man is thrown back by the force of the attack's impact. Baruka then realizes the creature can use magic and that its feathers explode on their own. The giant monster screams again, preparing to launch another volley of feathers at them. The protagonist warns that the enemy is going to attack again and shouts for his friend to run. But suddenly, a mysterious voice says they are wrong and a new person appears. A blue-haired woman appears beside them and says this is their chance to attack. At this, the newcomer charges and attacks the monsters with a blow from her sword. With a quick and precise movement, the woman cuts the creature's wings with her blade. She then charges forward and defeats the other monsters with impressive speed. Ash and Ruka are completely shocked by the strength of the mysterious warrior. With a confident look, the woman shouts for the two of them to follow her to a safe place. Suddenly, a new group of hunters appears and charges together to fight the monsters. An archer fires a green energy arrow that flies toward her enemy. The attack hits its mark and manages to defeat some of the smaller flying creatures. Another woman with white hair charges and cuts one of the monsters with her shining sword. A man then finishes off the last creature with a precise blow from his bluish blade. The protagonist and his friend are impressed and say the new group is incredible. The blue-haired woman then approaches and says it's been a while since they've seen each other. Ash thanks her for saving them and calls her by the name Tanya, which surprises her. Suddenly, the woman kisses him on the cheek, leaving him completely flustered and speechless. Baruka, who is watching, is shocked and very jealous of the newcomer's action. With a mischievous smile, Tanya says she would do anything for him without any problem. The blonde then runs to separate the two and yells for the woman to stop it now. Very angry, she scratches her friend's face to try to wipe off the kiss mark. Yuruka glares at him furiously and asks who that woman is and what she was doing. With a smile, the blue-haired woman wonders who that girl is after all. The scene then changes to a tavern where the three are sitting together at a table. The blue-haired woman introduces herself as Tanya Sander and greets the blonde. Ash explains that she is the leader of the goddess's sword party and a noble who became a hunter. The young man asks what she's doing there, and Tanya says she returned from a trip that day. She says she heard he defeated a named monster and that if he hadn't, she would have. Baruka gets annoyed by the comment, and Ash says Tanya probably could have done it. He reveals she was one of those who defeated the red monkey, and the blonde is shocked. The nobleman says she became a hunter to gain fame with her own name, not her family's. The girl then asks how a noble knows him, and the young man seems a bit embarrassed. He tells her that Tanya tried to recruit him for her party, but he ended up refusing the offer. The blue-haired woman then looks at him with a mischievous expression and says she hasn't given up. Ash tries to convince him, saying that joining her party would be safer for him. With a mischievous smile, Tanya says he can have her body as he pleases. Yuruka is shocked by the proposal, and the young man spits out his drink with a red face. The noblewoman asks if it's not a good deal, and the young man shouts that's not the point. Awkwardly, he gets up and says he needs to go to the restroom to escape the situation. Taya then looks at him with a smile as he walks away, a bit embarrassed. Suddenly, the blonde slams her mug on the table and glares at the noblewoman with a furious look. With a dark aura around her, Ruka threatens her and says if she touches him, she'll regret it. The blue-haired woman just laughs and says the young woman is the very jealous type. With a smile, she holds the girl's face and says she doesn't just want Ash. With a mischievous smile, Tanya reveals she also wants the young blonde for herself. Yuruka is completely shocked and speechless at the noblewoman's sudden declaration. The blue-haired woman says everyone in her party is satisfied with her techniques. Hearing this, Tanya's companions blush and look awkward at the comment. The blonde is speechless and her face turns red as she realizes the woman's intentions. Tanya says she takes whatever she desires and that's why she doesn't hesitate to use her weapons. Yuruka glares at her angrily and seems to dislike the noblewoman's attitude at all. With a determined look, she says she won't lose and won't give up her beloved. With a smile, the blue-haired woman snaps her fingers and seems to have an idea. Suddenly, several waitresses appear, bringing many mugs of drinks to the table. Tanya then proposes a drinking competition to settle the dispute between the two. The protagonist returns from the restroom and is shocked to see his friend asking for another mug. Yuruka drinks nonstop and seems determined to win the contest at any cost. Tanya doesn't fall behind either and drinks at the same speed to keep up with her rival. The two then glare at each other furiously as they continue to drink without stopping for a moment. The young man tells his friend to stop, but she yells at him and tells him to shut up. After a while, the blonde finally passes out on the table, and Ash asks Tanya to stop. With a victorious smile, the noblewoman says the young hunter now owes her one. The protagonist then says waiting is useless because he's not going to change his mind. The blue-haired woman just laughs and seems not to mind the refusal. With a wink, Tanya says goodbye to the young man and leaves with her group. The protagonist then carries his friend on his back through the dark city streets. Even passed out, the girl tells him to hold on tight because she's there with him. With a smile, she says she won't let anyone have him and hugs him lovingly. Ash just sighs and continues on his way through the city under the light of the full moon. The next day, an older, well-dressed man calls the two for a conversation. He asks the young man to tell him about the Dullahan, and the pair looks at him, a bit confused. The man introduces himself and shakes Ash's hand, asking how the fight with the monster was. With his eyes glowing, he asks if the creature was strong, and the young man confirms it was. The gentleman then starts asking several questions about the enemy's appearance and strength. With great excitement, he asks about its dominant hand, its speed, and even its smell. Yuruka's a bit scared by the man's attitude and wonders who he is. Ash then asks his name and the old man apologizes for getting too excited. He introduces himself as Edgar, a marquis and the director of a research institute. The news shocks the two, who realize he is a noble of a very high rank. Edgar reveals he saw the monster's armor and found it all fascinating. He says he wanted to know more details and couldn't help but come to them. The protagonist is impressed by the energy of the old man before him. After the introductions, Edgar says it's time to get to what really matters. With a snap of his fingers, a large explosion of light suddenly happens in the room. The old man lights his cigarette with magic, and fire appears at the tip of his index finger. Ash and Yuruka are shocked to realize that this man is a powerful sorcerer. Edgar takes a drag and with a smile asks them again to tell him everything. With a dark aura around him, he asks the young man once more to talk about the monster. The protagonist then agrees and begins to recount all the details of the great battle. After a while, the clock on the wall shows that the conversation has been going on for hours. Tired, the former knight finishes speaking and says that's all he knows about the dull hand. The old man then thanks them and says the two did a good job on the mission. Ash takes the opportunity and asks what the institute's director thinks of the situation. At this, the man puts out his cigarette and says he agrees with the knight's idea. The young man then asks if a person can really transform into a monster. Edgar reveals that before coming there, he went to take a look at the 14th floor. He searched the area where the dull hand was seen with a lantern in his hand. The old man then illuminates the path with his light in search of any important clue. Suddenly, he comes across several armored skeletons standing in the darkness. There, he found the mortal remains of several knights from the ancient kingdom. The bodies were fused with the dungeon walls and turned into bone. Ash and Yuruka are completely shocked by the director's terrible revelation. The protagonist asks if those were the Dullahan's companions, and he confirms it. With a serious look, the old man then asks if they know about magical essence. He explains it's the energy that mages use and that the dungeon is full of it. The old man continues, saying that a sword exposed to it can become a magic sword. By the same logic, he says a body exposed to it can also turn into a monster. Ash and Yuruka are silent for a moment, thinking about the terrible possibility. With an excited smile, Edgar asks if all of this isn't thrilling for them. He shouts excitedly that solving the secrets of the dungeons is the kingdom's truth. Yuruka then asks if he went to the 14th floor alone, and the man laughs. He says of course he didn't go alone, and that he took his assistant and some guards. Suddenly, his assistant Sergio runs into the room and shouts that he found him. The young man complains that he's always running off alone, and the old man looks at him with a smile. Edgar says he wanted to hear more from Ash, but his assistant scolds him for his attitude. Bale reveals the director always acts like this, and the protagonist says it seems difficult. Ash then comments that he just heard how magic swords are created, and Bale is shocked. The noble shouts that it's a secret, and the blonde realizes she shouldn't have heard that. The old man says he has decided to move forward with a plan, and Bale seems to agree. Before leaving, the knight asks the two to go to the association the next day. The protagonist and his friend are confused by the request, but don't question the order. The scene then takes us to the Hunters Guild on a clear and very sunny day. There, the two meet with the receptionist May to resolve some matters. The young man then points to Bale, who is nearby, and asks if that is a bailment. But the receptionist says that has nothing to do with Bale, and that he's on the ground floor. Suddenly, Kyle, the leader of the Golden Knight Party, enters the room with a smile on his face. Shortly after, the two men from the Big Claw Party also arrive, greeting everyone. To the protagonist's surprise, Tanya also appears in her full armor. Ash asks if they were also called by Bale, and the men confirm they were. The blue-haired woman then realizes that all the elite parties are gathered there. Yuruka gets angry seeing Tanya and holds her beloved's arm very tightly. Edgar enters the room with a good morning and says it seems everyone has arrived for the meeting. Kyle then asks him why he gathered all the city's best hunters there. The old man says that named monsters have been appearing more frequently lately. He shows drawings of the red monkey and the Dullahan and says they are very strong. Edgar explains that something strange is happening inside the city's second dungeon. At this, the director announces they will conduct a large-scale investigation in the dungeon. This means the elite hunters will have to unite for the grand mission. With a serious look, the old man then asks for everyone's help in the upcoming investigation. Everyone is silent for a moment, shocked by the director's unexpected request. Bale then says he will explain the rest of the mission details to all the hunters. One of the men asks if they are to go to the 20th floor and realizes it will be difficult. The receptionist says the investigation will begin in 2 weeks to give them time to prepare. Tanya then asks if they are obligated to participate in the investigation mission. Bale confirms it's mandatory as the order came from the Queen and the Institute. The men from Big Claw say that with everyone together, the mission will be very easy. But the noble tells them not to underestimate the danger and asks what the deepest floor they've reached is. The parties reveal they have reached the 18th and 17th floors. The protagonist then says he is currently exploring the 16th floor. Bale says this is impressive, but the real problem is the 19th floor. With a serious look, he reveals that all investigation teams have been annihilated there. Ash is shocked and asks if even the Night Order was defeated. Bale confirms it and reveals there is a named monster much stronger than the others.